Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison, Chapter 7. The station was empty, but the ticket window was open, and a porter in a gray uniform was pushing a broom. I bought my ticket and climbed into the bus. There were only 2 passengers seated at the rear of the red and nickel interior, and I suddenly felt that I was dreaming. It was the vet who gave me a smile of recognition. An attendant sat beside him. "Welcome, young man," he called. "Imagine, Mr. Crenshaw," he said to the attendant, "we have a traveling companion." "Morning," I said reluctantly. I looked around for a seat away from them, but although the bus was almost empty, only the rear was reserved for us, and there was nothing to do but move back with them. I didn't like it. The vet was too much a part of an experience which I was already trying to blot out of my consciousness. His way of talking to Mr. Norton had been a foreshadowing of my misfortune, just as I had sensed that it would be. Now, having accepted my punishment, I wanted to remember nothing connected with True Blood or the Golden Day. Crenshaw, a much smaller man than Supercargo, said nothing. He was not the type usually sent out to accompany violent cases, and I was glad until I remembered that the only violent thing about the vet was his tongue. His mouth had already gotten me into trouble, and now I hoped he wouldn't turn it upon the white driver. That was apt to get us killed. What was he doing on the bus anyway? God, how had Dr. Bledsoe worked that fast? I stared at the fat man. "How did your friend Mr. Norton make out?" he asked. "He's okay," I said. "No more fainting spells?" "No." "Did he bawl you out for what happened?" "He didn't blame me," I said. "Good. I think I shocked him more than anything else he saw at the Golden Day. I hoped I hadn't caused you trouble. School isn't out so soon, is it?" "Not quite," I said lightly. "I am leaving early in order to take a job." "Wonderful. At home?" "No, I thought I might make more money in New York." "New York," he said. "That's not a place. It's a dream. When I was your age, it was Chicago. Now all the little black boys run away to New York. Out of the fire into the melting pot. I can see you after you've lived in Harlem for 3 months. Your speech will change. You'll talk a lot about college. You'll attend lectures at the men's house. You might even meet a few white folks. And listen," he said, leaning close to whisper, "you might even dance with a white girl." "I'm going to New York to work," I said, looking around me. "I won't have time for that." "You will, though," he teased. "Deep down, you're thinking about the freedom you've heard about up north. And you'll try it once, just to see if what you've heard is true." "There's other kinds of freedom besides some old white trash women," Crenshaw said. "He might want to see him some shows and eat in some of them big restaurants." The vet grinned. "Why, of course. But remember, Crenshaw, he's only going to be there a few months. Most of the time he'll be working, and so much of his freedom will have to be symbolic. And what will be his or any man's most easily accessible symbol of freedom? Why, a woman, of course. In 20 minutes he can inflate that symbol with all the freedom which he'll be too busy working to enjoy the rest of the time. He'll see." I tried to change the subject. "Where are you going?" I asked. "To Washington, D.C., he said. "Then you're cured?" "Cured? There is no cure. He's being transferred," said Crenshaw. "Yes, I'm headed for St. Elizabeth," the vet said. "The ways of authority are indeed mysterious. For a year I've tried to get transferred. Then this morning I'm suddenly told to pack. I can't but wonder if our little conversation with your friend Mr. Norton had something to do with it." "How could he have anything to do with it?" I said, remembering Dr. Bledsoe's threat. "How could he have anything to do with your being on this bus?" he said. He winked. His eyes twinkled. "All right, forget what I've said. But for God's sakes, learn to look beneath the surface," he said. "Come out of the fog, young man, and remember you don't have to be a complete fool in order to succeed. Play the game, but don't believe in it. That much you owe yourself. Even if it lands you in a straitjacket or a padded cell. Play the game, but play it your own way, part of the time at least. Play the game, but raise the ante, my boy. Learn how it operates, learn how you operate. I wish I had time to tell you only a fragment. We're an ass-backward people, though. You might even beat the game. It's really a very crude affair, really pre-Renaissance. And that game has been analyzed, put down in books, but down here they've forgotten to take care of the books, and that's your opportunity. You're hidden right out in the open. That is, you would be if you only realized it. They wouldn't see you because they don't expect you to know anything, since they believe they've taken care of that." "Man, who's this they you talking so much about?" said Crenshaw. The vet looked annoyed. "They?" he said. "They? Why, the same they we always mean, the white folks' authority, the gods, fate, circumstances. The force that pulls your strings until you refuse to be pulled any more. The big man who's never there, where you think he is." Crenshaw grimaced. "You talk too damn much, man," he said. "You talk and you don't say nothing." "Oh, I have a lot to say, Crenshaw. I put into words things which most men feel, if only slightly. Sure, I'm a compulsive talker of a kind, but I'm really more clown than fool. But Crenshaw," he said, rolling a wand of the newspaper which lay across his knees, "you don't realize what's happening. Our young friend is going north for the first time. It is the first time, isn't it?" "You're right," I said. "Of course. Were you ever north before, Crenshaw?" "I've been all over the country," Crenshaw said. "I know how they do wherever they do it. And I know how to act, too. Besides, you ain't going north, not the real north. You're going to Washington. It's just another southern town." "Yes, I know," the vet said. "But think of what this means for the young fellow. He's going free, in the broad daylight, and alone. I can remember when young fellows like him had first to commit a crime or be accused of one before they tried such a thing. Instead of leaving in the light of morning, they went in the dark of night, and no bus was fast enough. Isn't that so, Crenshaw?" Crenshaw stopped unwrapping a candy bar and looked at him sharply. His eyes narrowed. "How the hell I know?" he said. "I'm sorry, Crenshaw," the vet said. "I thought that as a man of experience—" "Well, I ain't had that experience. I went north of my own free will." "But haven't you heard of such cases?" "Hearing ain't experiencing," Crenshaw said. "No, it isn't. But since there's always an element of crime in freedom—" "I ain't committed no crime. I didn't mean that you had," the vet said. "I apologize. Forget it." Crenshaw took an angry bite from his candy bar, mumbling, "I wish you'd hurry up and get depressive. Maybe then you won't talk so damn much." "Yes, doctor," the vet said mockingly. "I'll be depressive soon enough. But while you eat your candy, just allow me to chew the rag. There's a kind of substance in it." "Oh, quit trying to show off your education," Crenshaw said. "You're riding back here in the Jim Crow just like me. Besides, you're a nut." The vet winked at me, continuing his flow of words as the bus got under way. We were going at last, and I took a last longing look as the bus shot around the highway which circled the school. I turned and watched it recede from the rear window. The sun caught its treetops, bathed its low-set buildings and ordered grounds. Then it was gone. In less than 5 minutes, the spot of earth which I identified with the best of all possible worlds was gone, lost within the wild, uncultivated countryside. A flash of movement drew my eye to the side of the highway now, and I saw a moccasin wiggle swiftly along the gray concrete, vanishing into a length of iron pipe that lay beside the road. I watched the flashing past of cotton fields and cabins, feeling that I was moving into the unknown. The vet and Crenshaw prepared to change buses at the next stop, and upon leaving, the vet placed his hand upon my shoulder and looked at me with kindness, and, as always, he smiled. "Now is the time for offering fatherly advice," he said, "but I'll have to spare you that, since I guess I'm nobody's father except my own. Perhaps that's the advice to give you. Be your own father, young man, and remember the world is possibility if only you'll discover it. Last of all, leave the Mr. Nortons alone, and if you don't know what I mean, think about it. Farewell." I watched him following Crenshaw through the group of passengers waiting to get on, a short comical figure turning to wave, then disappearing through the door of the red brick terminal. I sat back with a sigh of relief, yet once the passengers were aboard and the bus under way again, I felt sad and utterly alone. Not until we were sailing through the Jersey countryside did my spirits begin to rise. Then my old confidence and optimism revived, and I tried to plan my time in the North. I would work hard and serve my employer so well that he would shower Dr. Bledsoe with favorable reports, and I would save my money and return in the fall, full of New York culture. I'd be indisputably the leading campus figure. Perhaps I would attend town meeting, which I had heard over the radio. I'd learn the platform tricks of the leading speakers, and I would make the best of my contacts. When I met the big men to whom my letters were addressed, I would put on my best manner. I would speak softly, in my most polished tones, smile agreeably, and be most polite, and I would remember that if he meant any of the important gentlemen, should begin a topic of conversation, I would never begin a subject of my own, which I found unfamiliar. I would smile and agree. My shoes would be polished, my suit pressed, my hair dressed, not too much grease, and parted on the right side. My nails would be clean, and my armpits well deodorized. You had to watch the last item. You couldn't allow them to think all of us smelled bad. The very thought of my contacts gave me a feeling of sophistication, of worldliness, which, as I fingered the 7 important letters in my pocket, made me feel light and expansive. I dreamed, with my eyes gazing blankly upon the landscape, until I looked up to see a redcap frowning down. "Buddy, are you getting off here?" he said. "If so, you better get started." "Oh, sure," I said, beginning to move. "Sure, but how do you get to Harlem?" "That's easy," he said. "You just keep heading north." And while I got down, my bags and my prize briefcase, still as shiny as the night of the Battle Royale, he instructed me how to take the subway. Then I struggled through the crowd. Moving into the subway, I was pushed along by the milling salt and pepper mob, seized in the back by a burly blue-uniformed attendant about the size of supercargo, and crammed, bags and all, into a train that was so crowded that everyone seemed to stand with his head and back and his eyes bulging, like chickens frozen at the sound of danger. Then the door banged behind me, and I was crushed against a huge woman in black, who shook her head and smiled, while I stared with horror at a large mole that arose out of the oily whiteness of her skin like a black mountain, sweeping out of a rain-wet plain. And all the while I could feel the rubbery softness of her flesh against the length of my body. I could neither turn sideways nor back away, nor set down my bags. I was trapped, so close that simply by nodding my head I might have brushed her lips with mine. I wanted desperately to raise my hands to show her that it was against my will. I kept expecting her to scream, until finally the car lurched and I was able to free my left arm. I closed my eyes, holding desperately to my lapel. The car roared and swayed, pressing me hard against her, but when I took a furtive glance around, no one was paying me the slightest attention. And even she seemed lost in her own thoughts. The train seemed to plunge downhill now, only to lunge to a stop that shot me out upon a platform, feeling like something regurgitated from the belly of a frantic whale. Wrestling with my bags, I swept along with the crowd, up the stairs into the hot street. I didn't care where I would walk the rest of the way. For a moment I stood before a shop window, staring at my own reflection in the glass, trying to recover from the ride against the woman. I was limp, my clothing wet. "But you're up north now," I told myself. "Up north." Yes, but suppose she had screamed. The next time I used the subway, I'd always be sure to enter with my hands grasping my lapels, and I'd keep them there until I left the train. Why, my God, they must have riots on those things all the time. Why hadn't I read about them? I had never seen so many black people against the background of brick buildings, neon signs, plate glass, and roaring traffic, not even on trips I had made with the debating team to New Orleans, Dallas, or Birmingham. They were everywhere, so many, and moving along with so much tension and noise that I wasn't sure whether they were about to celebrate a holiday or join in a street fight. There were even black girls behind the counters of the 5 and 10 as I passed. Then, at the street intersection, I had the shock of seeing a black policeman directing traffic, and there were white drivers in the traffic who obeyed his signals, as though it was the most natural thing in the world. Sure, I had heard of it, but this was real. My courage returned. This really was Harlem. And now all the stories which I had heard of the city within a city leaped alive in my mind. The vet had been right. For me, this was not a city of realities, but of dreams. Perhaps because I had always thought of my life as being confined to the South. And now, as I struggled through the lines of people, a new world of possibilities suggested itself to me faintly, like a small voice that was barely audible in the roar of city sounds. I moved wide-eyed, trying to take the bombardment of impressions. Then I stopped still. It was ahead of me, angry and shrill, and upon hearing it I had a sensation of shock and fear such as I had felt as a child when surprised by my father's voice. An emptiness widened in my stomach. Before me a gathering of people were almost blocking the walk, while above them a short, squat man shouted angrily from a ladder, to which were attached a collection of small American flags. "We're going to chase him out," the man cried. "Out! Tell him about it, Ras man," a voice called, and I saw the squat man shake his fist angrily over the uplifted faces, yelling something in a staccato West Indian accent, at which the crowd yelled threateningly. It was as though a riot would break any minute, against whom I didn't know. I was puzzled, both by the effect of his voice upon me, and by the obvious anger of the crowd. I had never seen so many black men angry in public before, and yet others passed the gathering by without even a glance. And as I came alongside, I saw 2 white policemen talking quietly with one another, their backs turned as they laughed at some joke. Even when the shirt-sleeved crowd cried out in angry affirmation of some remark of the speaker, they paid no attention. I was stunned. I stood gaping at the policemen, my bag settling upon the middle of the walk, until one of them happened to see me and nudged the other, who chewed lazily upon a wad of gum. "What can we do for you, bud?" he said. "I was just wondering," I said before I caught myself. "Yeah? I was just wondering how to get to Men's house, sir," I said. "Is that all?" "Yes, sir," I stammered. "You sure?" "Yes, sir." "He's a stranger," the other said. "Just coming to town, bud?" "Yes, sir," I said. "I just got off the subway." "You did, huh? Well, you want to be careful." "Oh, I will, sir. That's the idea. Keep it clean," he said, and directed me to Men's house. I thanked them and hurried on. The speaker had become more violent than before, and his remarks were about the government. The clash between the calm of the rest of the street and the passion of the voice gave the scene a strange, out-of-joint quality, and I was careful not to look back lest I see a riot flare. I reached Men's house in a sweat, registered, and went immediately to my room. I would have to take Harlem a little at a time.